In his loving embrace and infinite wisdom, Jesus sowed meaningful parables into our hearts, like seeds of faith germinating quietly. One of the warmest and most profound images he left us is of the spiritual harvest of the kingdom of heaven. The Lord likens this world to a vast field, where good wheat and weeds grow together, where good and evil coexist. Many times we are impatient, wanting to judge for ourselves, to uproot the evil things immediately. But the Lord, with the patience of a father, teaches us to wait until the harvest. And in that final harvest, it will not be us, with our hasty judgments, but the angels themselves who will be the reapers. They, by God's command, will carry out the final, just, and complete separation. This image does not sow fear. On the contrary, it brings great comfort. It reminds us that God is the one who sees all things, and he has his own plan. Our duty is to persevere in cultivating the good seeds in our souls, to live fully in love, and to trust in his providence. Then, on the harvest day, our souls will be like wheat heavy with grain, gathered into the eternal granary. As Jesus himself explained to his disciples, the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age. The reapers are the angels. The image of the spiritual harvest is not just a prophecy about the end times. It is also a flowing stream of profound lessons, watering the barren soil of our souls. From a simple parable on the shore of the Sea of Galilee long ago, Jesus sowed living philosophical seeds into the stream of time, so that each of us, in any era, can gather for ourselves the fruits of wisdom. Let us quiet our hearts, return to that simple setting, to listen to him speak and discover these timeless truths. Before we begin, we invite you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel, to spread this useful content to relatives and friends. Thank you, and we invite you to listen. 1. The haste to judge can harm the seeds of good. In life, we often tend to quickly categorize things as black and white, good and bad. But human judgment is always limited and one-sided. When we try to remove what we consider bad, we risk hurting, even destroying, the good things that are quietly growing alongside it, which we are unaware of. God's patience is a lesson for human tolerance. One evening, as Jesus was teaching, the Apostle Peter approached, whispering and pointing to a tax collector sitting listening in the distance. "Teacher, why do you let a sinner like him be here? Your words are treasures. Why let the unworthy hear them? I will chase him away." Jesus looked at Peter, his eyes gentle. "Peter, if you were the owner of a rice field and saw weeds growing among the young rice, would you rush in to pull the weeds?" "No, Lord," Peter replied, "because in pulling the weeds, I might pull up the rice stalks too." Jesus nodded. The human soul is the same. You only see his actions of yesterday, but you do not see the seed of repentance sprouting in his heart today. Let them both grow together. At the harvest, our Father in heaven will know what to do. 2. The responsibility of the wheat is to bear grain, not to hate the weeds. This world always has coexisting good and evil, light and darkness. Our job is not to spend our lives resenting, tormenting, or negatively fighting against the evil things around us. Instead, let us focus on nurturing our own souls so they become beautiful, strong, and bear fruit. A stalk of wheat heavy with grain is worth more than 1,000 curses against the weeds. A woman in the crowd lamented to the Lord, "Teacher, I am so tired. All around me are deceitful, cunning people. What must I do to fight them?" Jesus picked up a nearby stalk of wheat and said, "Look, does this stalk spend its time resenting the weed next to it for stealing its nutrients? No, it just focuses on absorbing the essence of the earth and sky, reaching for the sun and forming golden grains. Your light is the most powerful answer to the darkness." 3. The final judgment belongs to God, not to man. We can discern, we can evaluate, but the final right to judge does not belong to us. Trying to play the role of a judge in another's life only leads to arrogance, error, and mutual harm. Let us trust in the absolute justice of the Creator, who sees even the deepest secrets of the human heart. The Apostle John, with his zeal, saw someone who was not in their group casting out demons in Jesus' name. He immediately stopped the man and reported back to the Lord. "Teacher, we saw someone who does not follow us casting out demons in your name, so we stopped him." Jesus replied gently, "Do not stop him, John. Whoever is not against us is for us. You are not the gatekeeper of the kingdom of heaven. Your job is to sow seeds. As for deciding who belongs to the Father, leave that to the Father in heaven and his angels at the harvest." 4. God's delay is mercy, not forgetfulness. Many wonder why God does not intervene immediately to punish the wicked. This parable shows that this delay is not because he doesn't see or know, but because it is an opportunity. It is time for the weeds to possibly change, and more importantly, it is to protect the young, weak wheat from being harmed by a hasty purge. A farmer came to ask Jesus, "Rabbi, my wicked neighbor secretly sowed weeds in my field. Why didn't you send a bolt of lightning to strike him down as a warning?" Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "My friend, if you were a potter and saw a pot slightly misshapen while the clay was still wet, would you smash it immediately? Or would you patiently reshape it, giving it more time in your hands? Our Father is the same. He delays his wrath to await repentance." 5. Evil can initially look very similar to good. Tares, a type of weed, look very much like wheat when they are young. This reminds us that wrong, toxic things do not always appear with a hideous face. They can creep into life in very normal, even attractive forms. It takes wisdom and time to recognize the true nature of all things. Andrew asked Jesus as they passed a field, "Teacher, how could the owner let the enemy sow tares without knowing?" Jesus replied, "Because the enemy came at night, and the tares, when they first sprout, look no different from the wheat. Many false doctrines are the same. At first, they sound very reasonable and good. But look at their fruit. A good tree bears good fruit. Time will show what is true wheat and what are tares." 6. The existence of evil does not diminish the value of good. The value of the field is not determined by the presence of weeds, but by the golden wheat. Similarly, do not let the existence of negative things in life discourage you, or make you doubt the value of the good deeds you are doing. Every act of love, every word of truth, is a precious stalk of wheat in God's field. A young girl came to the Lord, her eyes welling with tears. "Teacher, I have tried to live a good life, but it seems meaningless. The wicked roam free, while I only encounter misfortune." Jesus pointed to a stalk heavy with grain. "Look, no matter how tall the weeds grow, does it make this grain any less full? No matter how thick the darkness, can it extinguish the light of a single lamp? Your value is not found in comparing yourself to others, but in the very goodness you are cultivating." 7. Each person decides whether they are wheat or weeds through their daily choices. Although both receive the same sunlight and rain, the wheat still grows up as wheat, and the weeds remain weeds. This speaks to the power of nature and choice. Circumstances may be the same, but how we react, how we absorb and transform what life gives us, will determine who we become. A young man asked the Lord, "Teacher, if God has already destined who is wheat and who are weeds, what is the use of our efforts?" Jesus smiled. God sows only good seed, but whether that seed chooses to root deeply in the good soil of faith, whether it chooses to reach for the light of truth, is up to the seed itself. Every day, when you choose forgiveness over resentment, choose love over hatred, you are deciding that you are wheat. 8. Unity protects good souls. The reason the owner did not allow the weeds to be pulled was for fear of harming the wheat. This shows God's concern for the community. Good people live interspersed, relying on each other, creating a strong root system. Unity and love within the community of believers are a layer of protection for each individual against hasty and mistaken judgments. The apostles were arguing about who was the greatest among them. Jesus called them over and said, "You are like stalks of wheat in a field. If each stalk only thinks of itself, trying to grow taller than the others, then when the storm comes, all will easily break. But if your roots are intertwined in love, you will form a strong mat, protecting one another and standing firm together until the harvest." 9. The ultimate purpose is gathering, not destruction. The focus of the harvest is not on burning the weeds, but on gathering the wheat into the granary. The punishment of the wicked is merely a consequence of the sorting. God's main purpose is to save and gather those who belong to Him. This is a philosophy of hope, directing us toward the eternal reward rather than focusing only on the punishment. Thomas, who often doubted, asked, "Teacher, the day of judgment must be a terrifying day." Jesus replied, "Thomas, for a farmer, is the harvest day a day of fear or a day of joy?" "It is a day of joy, Lord, because that is when he reaps the rewards of his labor." "Exactly," said the Lord. "For those who are my Father's wheat, that day is a day of joy, a day of returning home, of being gathered into the eternal granary." Think of the granary, not just the fire. Chapter 10. Our role is to plant and care. The angel's role is to harvest. This philosophy clearly delineates the role of humans and the role of celestial beings. We are not called to execute the final judgment. Our mission on this earth is to sow the word of God, to care for the fields of our souls and others with love and service. The harvesting and sorting, let us trustingly leave that to God's reapers. After finishing the parable, a person from the village asked, "So what must we do while waiting for the harvest, teacher?" Jesus replied, "The sower has done his work. The reapers will come at the end of the season. But now it is the time for the gardeners. Water the young plants with prayer. Pull out the insects of doubt from your brothers' hearts. Fertilize the field with acts of charity. Be faithful caretakers. The harvest will come at its proper time." Before we continue today's journey of discovery, we kindly ask you to take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If this content brings positive value, don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive things to your friends and family. We invite you to continue the program. 11. Waiting is the greatest test of faith. Faith is not a momentary outburst, but a persistent journey. The hardest part is not sowing the seed, but the long, drawn-out period afterward, when we must wait in a world full of growing weeds and trust that the harvest will surely come. Patience in waiting is the measure of the strength of our faith. An elderly man came to Jesus, his voice full of weariness. "Teacher, I have lived my whole life trying to do what is right, but the wicked next to me always seem to be lucky. I keep waiting, but I never see God's justice." Jesus pointed out to the sea, where fishermen were patiently mending their nets. "Look, does the fisherman lose heart when he has to mend a torn net? Or does he give up just because he caught no fish one night? Your faith is like a lighthouse. Its value is not in stopping the storm, but in steadfastly shining until the dawn comes. My Father's dawn will not be late." 12. The soil is neutral. It is the seed that determines the plant. Life, like the soil, gives us the same conditions: time, air, sunlight, and rain. But whether we become wheat or weeds depends on the seed of our inner nature and our choices. Do not blame the circumstances. Re-examine the seed you are nurturing in your soul. A young man complained, "Why is it that my brother and I were born in the same family, yet he became wicked and I did not?" Jesus picked up a handful of soil and said, "This soil can grow fragrant rice, and it can also grow a bitter weed. The soil is impartial, but the rice seed, when it absorbs nutrients, uses them to create golden grain. The weed seed, absorbing the same nutrients, uses them to produce bitterness. People are the same. Given the same teaching, the same event, a good soul will produce gratitude, while an evil soul will produce resentment." 13. To purify the world, start with your own field. We often easily see the weeds in other people's fields and are eager to pull them while neglecting the overgrown field of our own soul. The greatest change always begins with personal transformation. A field of yours that is clean of weeds and heavy with grain will be a more powerful testimony than 1,000 criticisms. The apostles were sitting around discussing the corruption of the religious leaders in Jerusalem. Matthew said, "We must do something to expose them." Jesus was silent for a moment, then asked, "Which of you, before setting sail, would go and fix another man's boat without mending the hole in his own? Before you worry about pulling the weeds in all of Judea, make sure that in the field of your own heart there is not a single weed of pride, envy, or judgment." 14. Judgment only reveals nature. It does not change it. The harvest day is not the day that weeds are turned into wheat. It is simply the day that the true nature of each plant is exposed to the light. Fire does not turn straw into gold. It only burns the straw and makes the gold purer. Therefore, every day we live is an opportunity for us to strengthen our wheat nature. Nicodemus came to Jesus at night and asked, "How can a person be saved on the last day?" Jesus replied, "Sir, when a carpenter looks at a piece of wood, he already knows if it can be used to build a house or just for firewood. The last day is the same. The angels will not decide who is wheat and who are weeds. They will simply recognize what has already taken shape. Your job today is to let my word shape you, so that on that day you are recognized as good wood, useful for building the kingdom of heaven. 15. The most dangerous enemy is the one who sows in darkness. The parable says the enemy came while everyone was sleeping. This evil often does not act openly, but creeps in when we are off guard, negligent in our spiritual life, or when society is asleep in apathy. Vigilance and prayer are the sentinels for the field of the soul. The apostle Jude, not Iscariot, asked, "Teacher, how can we fight the devil when we cannot see him?" Jesus answered, "You don't need to see the thief's face to know you must guard your house. You guard it at night, which is when you are most vulnerable. Likewise, guard your soul during the times you feel most lazy, discouraged, or lonely. For it is in those moments that the enemy is prowling, seeking to sow seeds of doubt and despair in your heart." 16. The roots of good and evil are intertwined more deeply than we think. Another reason the owner did not allow the weeds to be pulled was that their roots had wrapped around the roots of the wheat. In life, the line between good and evil is sometimes unclear. An act that seems good may hide a bad motive, and within a sinful person, there may still be flickering embers of good. It takes the wisdom of God to untangle these complexities. Mary Magdalene, after being forgiven by the Lord, was still shunned by many. A Pharisee said to Jesus, "Why do you let this sinful woman near you? Her bad example will harm others." Jesus replied, "Do you see a tree whose roots push deep into both fertile soil and rocky ground? People are the same. In this woman's soul, you see only the roots in the rocky ground of her past, but I see the roots that are clinging tightly to the good soil of repentance. To cruelly uproot her past is to kill her future." 17. Every dawn is a grace for both wheat and weeds. God's sun rises on both the righteous and the wicked. Each new day is not only a chance for the good to live better, but also a silent invitation for the lost to turn back. God's mercy is shown through the very impartial existence of nature. A Roman soldier was beating a Jewish man. Someone in the crowd said angrily, "May God not let the sun rise tomorrow for this wicked man." Jesus heard this and said, "If the Father in heaven only sent rain on the wheat fields, wouldn't the entire plain die of thirst because the areas with weeds would dry up? His mercy is vaster than your anger. He lets the sun rise, hoping that its warmth might melt even the hardest of hearts." 18. The ultimate value lies in quality, not quantity. The parable does not talk about whether there is more wheat or more weeds. The focus is on gathering the wheat into the granary. Even if the world is filled with evil, as long as there are a few righteous souls, they are a priceless treasure in God's eyes. Do not follow the crowd. Pursue authenticity. The apostles returned, joyfully boasting that they had preached to many people. Jesus said, "I rejoice in that. But tell me, among those you spoke to, how many souls were truly transformed?" The field owner does not count the number of plants in his field. He weighs the grain he gathers. One plump grain of wheat is more precious than an entire overgrown bush of weeds. 19. The owner's wisdom surpasses the servant's zeal. The servants in the parable had good intentions. They wanted to help their master immediately. But they lacked the master's foresight. In the life of faith, sometimes zeal without wisdom can cause great harm. Obedience and trust in God's plan are more important than acting on our own impulses. The Apostle Peter, after cutting off the soldier's ear in the Garden of Gethsemane, was still fuming. Jesus healed the soldier and said to Peter, "Do you think your sword can clear out the weeds? It only spills blood and sows more hatred. Put your sword away. The field owner knows when the harvest is, and he has his own reapers, who will not spill a single drop of blood." 20. The final destiny of goodness is to shine. The reward for the wheat is not just being safe in the granary, but shining like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. This shows that the purpose of good is not to be passive, but to become a source of light, a positive energy for the universe. Goodness, by its very nature, is a glory. When Jesus was transfigured on Mount Tabor, the apostles were overwhelmed by his radiance. After coming down the mountain, the Lord said, "What you saw was a glimpse of the harvest. It is the moment when the true nature of the wheat is revealed. Every righteous person among you carries such a light within. Nurture it. Do not let the worries of the world dim it. For on the last day, the entire kingdom of heaven will be ablaze with you." 21. The enemy's goal is to pollute, not just to destroy. The enemy did not burn the field. He secretly sowed weeds in it. The goal of evil is not always to completely destroy the good, but to mix with it, to make people unable to distinguish between true and false. The chaos of truth and values is the devil's greatest success. A scholar came to debate with Jesus. "There are many teachers, and each one says something different. How do we know what is truth?" Jesus replied, "The true shepherd enters by the gate and calls his sheep by name. The thief climbs in another way. My Father's teaching brings peace and clarity, like clear water. The enemy's teaching sows confusion and division, like mud stirred up in water. Look at the fruit of that teaching in your soul, and you will know where it comes from." 22. Freedom is proven in a world of choices. A field with only wheat has no choice. True righteousness is shown when a person chooses to be wheat amid a multitude of alluring weeds. The existence of evil, though painful, is the necessary environment for true freedom and love to be expressed. A rich young man asked Jesus, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" After hearing Jesus' reply, he went away sad. The apostles were surprised. Jesus said, "Can I force him to give away his wealth? No. God's field is not a place of plants forced into rows. It is a place where each seed freely chooses where it will take root. The choice to abandon the weeds of worldly wealth to become the wheat of the kingdom must come from a free heart." 23. Do not despair at the presence of weeds. Rejoice in the vitality of the wheat. The human mind is easily obsessed with the negative. We see the weeds and worry for the whole field. But the parable invites a change of perspective. Focus on the intense vitality of the wheat. Goodness, though quiet, is always resiliently existing and growing. In a village suffering from famine, everyone was weeping. Jesus saw a woman sharing the last half of her bread with an orphan. He said to his disciples, "You hear the cries of the whole village because of the weeds of famine. But I see the wheat field of compassion blooming in this woman. One small act of love has the power to feed a generation." 24. The command, "Let both grow together," is an act of supreme trust. The field owner had complete trust in the vitality of his wheat and the precision of his final plan. He did not panic at the enemy's infiltration. This teaches us to trust in God's sovereignty. He never loses control. The chaos we see is only temporary within a grand and orderly plan. Martha, in her anxiety, said to Jesus, "Lord, don't you see? This world is becoming more and more chaotic. How can you be so calm?" Jesus replied, "Martha, do you worry when you see a weaver working with many-colored threads that look tangled? You only worry because you cannot see the complete picture he is weaving. Trust the weaver. My Father knows exactly what he is doing with every thread of this world." 25. Fire both purifies and destroys. The nature of the object determines its fate. The weeds are thrown into the fire to be burned, but fire is also the image of purification for precious metals. The same fire of judgment has different results depending on the nature of each object. This reminds us that the trials of life are both a judgment for the wicked and an opportunity for purification for the righteous. A silversmith asked the Lord, "What is the meaning of suffering?" Jesus answered, "When you put silver in the furnace, what happens? Sir, the dross is burned away, and the pure silver becomes refined." "Suffering is the same," said the Lord. "For a soul like dry grass, it is destruction, but for a soul like precious silver, it is an opportunity to become more beautiful in God's eyes." 26. The sower's origin determines the seed's value. The parable clearly states, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man." We are good seed because we come from a good origin. Our value and potential do not originate from ourselves, but from the one who sowed us into this life. Recognizing this divine origin is the first step to living up to our dignity. A leper, cast out by society, said to Jesus, "I am worthless." Jesus touched him and said, "A coin of Caesar, even if dropped in the mud, does it lose Caesar's image and its value? No, you are the same. No matter how life has battered you, the image of my Father, who sowed you into the world, never fades. You are a seed of the kingdom of heaven. Remember that." 27. Sleepiness is the season of vulnerability. While everyone was sleeping is a powerful metaphor for spiritual negligence. When we stop praying, stop learning, stop doing good works, and live a passive life of faith, that is precisely when we open the door for the enemy to come in and sow vices and false ideas into our souls. The apostles fell asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus woke them and said, "Why are you sleeping? Wake up and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation." This warning was not just for that night, but for all of life. The moment you rest in self-satisfaction is the moment the enemy works hardest. 28. The question, "Where did the weeds come from?" is less important than "What must we do now?" The servants focused on finding the cause and assigning blame. "Sir, didn't you sow good seed? An enemy has done this." But the owner directed them toward the solution for the present and the future. Let both grow together. Sometimes we waste too much time analyzing the past and blaming others instead of listening to God's guidance for the present moment. A woman caught in adultery was brought before Jesus. Her accusers focused only on the sin that had happened. Jesus did not discuss the past. He wrote on the ground, then said to her, "Go, and from now on do not sin any more." He directed her to the future, to the action she must take right now. 29. The granary symbolizes God's order and peace. The granary is the place where the chaos of the field ends. There is no more struggle between wheat and weeds, no more worry about weather or pests. It is the image of the kingdom of heaven, a place of rest, order, and complete belonging. The deepest longing of the soul is to be gathered into this granary. An old soldier, weary from battle, asked Jesus, "Will there ever be a place with no more war?" Jesus replied, "This world is a battlefield where wheat and weeds fight for the light. But does a soldier fight forever? No, there will be a day he returns home. My Father has prepared a granary, a peaceful home where all wars have ended and every tear will be wiped away. 30. The final glory is a shared light. The righteous will shine like the sun. The sun does not shine for itself, but for the whole universe. The glory of the saved is not a selfish, individual enjoyment. It is a radiant communion, where the light of each person blends with the others, contributing to the splendor of the Father's kingdom. On the mountaintop, Jesus said to his closest disciples, "The light you see in me today is also the light hidden in each of you. One candle cannot light a whole room, but many candles placed together will drive out the thickest darkness. In my Father's kingdom, you will not be individual candles, but a single sun of unified love." Before we continue today's journey of discovery, we kindly ask you to take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If this content brings positive value, don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive things to your friends and family. We invite you to continue the program. 31. The owner's silence is a test of the servant's faith. When the servants reported the weeds, the owner did not panic or explain in detail. He just calmly ordered, "Let both grow together." That calmness is itself a lesson. God is not obligated to explain every chaos of the world to us. His silence and composure are sometimes an invitation for us to trust in his unseen wisdom. Lazarus had just died. Martha and Mary wept, saying to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died." In their words was a hidden question: where were you? Jesus did not explain why he was late. He just looked at them, was deeply moved, and said, "Trust in me." His silence in response to the question of his delay was an invitation to faith, a trust in a greater plan, even when reason could not understand. The resurrection of Lazarus afterward was the answer. 32. The purpose of wheat is to bear grain, not to judge weeds. All the energy of a wheat stalk is focused on creating full, healthy grains. If it wastes energy competing with or hating the weeds next to it, it will never fulfill its mission. Similarly, if a person is only busy criticizing, scrutinizing, and judging the faults of others, they will have no time or energy left to cultivate the good qualities in their own soul. While resting, the apostles began to gossip about another group of Jews who did not believe in Jesus. They criticized the group's hard-heartedness. Jesus broke off a dry stalk of wheat, rubbing it in his palm to release the grains. He said, "What is this stalk's mission? Is it to criticize the plant next to it for not bearing grain? No, it has only one purpose: to offer the best seeds to the Lord of the harvest. You also do not waste your time. Make your souls heavy with the seeds of love and mercy." 33. The presence of evil helps to refine the nature of good. Steel is tempered in fire. Diamonds are formed under extreme pressure. Similarly, the noblest human qualities, patience, forgiveness, compassion, and steadfast faith, are forged and sharpened precisely through the existence of and friction with the evil and injustice in life. A disciple asked, "Teacher, why wasn't a perfect world created from the beginning, a world with no weeds?" Jesus replied, "Can you know if a soldier is brave if he has never been to battle? Can you know if a sailor is skilled if the sea is always calm? It is in the storm that faith reveals its strength. It is amid injustice that love becomes radiant." 34. The field belongs to the sower, not to the plants. Both the wheat and the weeds are just tenants in the field. They have no right of ownership. This teaches us a lesson in humility. This world belongs to God. We live in it, but we are not the masters. Our duty is to live according to the will of the field owner, not to act as if we have the right to decide everything. A group of wealthy men were disputing with each other over land boundaries. They came to ask Jesus to arbitrate. Jesus refused and said to them, "Men, who appointed me as your judge? You fight over every inch of land, as if you can take it with you when you die. Remember, both you and the land you stand on belong to my Father in heaven. Instead of fighting for ownership, learn to be faithful stewards. 35. The enemy can only imitate. He cannot create. The devil can only sow tares, a counterfeit plant that looks like wheat. He cannot create good wheat himself. This reveals the nature of evil. It is always a copy, a distortion, a parasite on the good. It has no ability to create true life or beauty. A scribe tried to trap Jesus with cunning questions about the law. He quoted the scriptures skillfully but with evil intent. Jesus said to the crowd, "Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. The wolf can imitate the bleating of the sheep, but it cannot give milk. The enemy of truth can quote holy words, but he cannot produce the fruit of life. Look at their deeds, not just their words." 36. True nature is revealed only at maturity. As seedlings, wheat and tares are almost indistinguishable. Only when it is time to flower and bear grain does the difference become clear. This teaches that a person's true character and value cannot be judged by a few initial actions, but must be seen over a whole lifetime, through the fruits they produce. John the Baptist sent his disciples to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come?" He wanted clear confirmation. Jesus did not answer directly. He said, "Go back and report to John what you see and hear. The blind receive sight, the lame walk." He let the fruit of his work speak for his nature, rather than using a title. 37. The harvest is an act of order, not chaos. The parable describes a very orderly process. First, gather the weeds, tie them in bundles, and then gather the wheat into the granary. God's judgment is not a chaotic rage, but an orderly and just realignment of the universe, putting everything back in its proper nature and place. Many people feared the end of the world as a terrifying destruction. They asked Jesus about the signs. The Lord said, "When a homeowner cleans her house, does she throw everything out chaotically? No. She carefully puts the valuable items in the cupboard and gathers the trash to be thrown away. The day of the Son of Man is the same. It is not a day of chaos, but a day of clarity. Everything will be put in its right place." 38. The value of one soul is worth risking the whole field. The owner accepted a messy field full of weeds to protect every single stalk of wheat from being wrongly uprooted. This shows the infinite value of one righteous soul in God's eyes. He is willing to endure the existence of evil for a long time to ensure the salvation of those who belong to him. Jesus was eating with tax collectors and sinners. The Pharisees criticized. The Lord replied, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." He accepted being defiled in their eyes to save even one soul, just as the owner accepted an imperfect field for the sake of the precious wheat. 39. The weeds are tied up first. Evil is neutralized before good is glorified. The detail, "tie them in bundles," is important. It shows that before the righteous can enjoy their glory, the impact of evil will be stopped, controlled, and neutralized. This brings great comfort. In the kingdom of heaven, the safety of the righteous is absolute. The disciples asked about the fate of Judas Iscariot. Jesus said sorrowfully, "It would be better for that man if he had not been born." But then he continued to the other disciples, "But you are those who have stood by me in my trials. You will sit on thrones to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. Before the kingdom is established, all powers of betrayal and darkness will be bound. 40. Divine discernment is more like farming than warfare. It does not require the swift, violent attacks of a soldier, but the patient observation, patience, and deep understanding of the seasons of a farmer. To recognize truth and falsehood, right and wrong in life, we need a quiet and wise soul, rather than a hot, combative heart. James and John wanted to call down fire from heaven to destroy a Samaritan village that did not welcome the Lord. Jesus rebuked them. You do not know what kind of spirit you are of. The Son of Man did not come to destroy lives, but to save them. He taught them that the kingdom of heaven is not built by violence, but by patient cultivation, like a farmer waiting for the seed to grow. 41. The enemy's work thrives on anonymity. An enemy has done this. He never appears openly. Evil in the world often operates through anonymous structures, crowd trends, and baseless rumors, exposing and naming the nature of the wrongdoing. Envy, greed, pride is the first step to fighting it. When Jesus cast out a demon, some said, "He drives out demons by Beelzebul, the prince of demons." They did not dare to confront him, only whispered in the crowd. Jesus replied, "Any kingdom divided against itself will be ruined." He exposed the absurdity of their anonymous accusation, pulling the logic of darkness into the light for all to see. 42. The kingdom of heaven is a process, not an instant reality. The parable describes an entire season: sowing, sprouting, growing, maturing, and harvesting. Our spiritual life is the same. It is not a one-time saved event, but a continuous journey of growth, with difficult periods and times of patient waiting. An eager disciple asked, "Lord, when will the kingdom of heaven come?" Jesus answered, "The kingdom of heaven does not come in a way that can be observed, nor will people say, 'Here it is,' or 'There it is,' because the kingdom of heaven is in your midst. It is like a mustard seed, which is sown and grows into a large tree. It is an ongoing process." 43. The servant's question, "Do you want us to go and gather them?" reveals the human desire for immediate, simple solutions. We always want to clean things up right away, to solve problems completely. But God's way is more complex, patient, and multidimensional. He sees connections and consequences that we cannot. When the crowd wanted to make Jesus king after the miracle of the loaves, it was an immediate solution to their political problem. But Jesus withdrew to the mountain alone. He refused the simple human solution because his kingdom was not built on worldly power. His plan required a longer, harder path, the path of the cross. 44. The greatest tragedy of the weeds is their uselessness. It grows, takes up space, draws nutrients from the soil, but in the end, it offers no value, only fit to be burned. The parable implies that a life lived only for oneself, only causing harm to others, is ultimately a useless and empty life. Jesus told the story of the rich fool whose land produced a great crop. He only worried about building bigger barns to store his wealth for himself. God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" His wealth became useless, like an overgrown weed with no grain. 45. The reaper's authority comes directly from the owner. They do not act on their own initiative. They carry out a specific command at a specific time. This emphasizes that the final judgment is an event fully authorized and controlled by God. It is not random revenge, but the execution of heavenly justice. When Jesus spoke of the day of judgment, he said, "The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that cause sin and all who do evil." He clearly states who gives the order, the Son of Man, and who carries it out, his angels, affirming an absolute order and authority. 46. Their Father's kingdom implies belonging and inheritance. The wheat is not just put into a neutral storage place, but into the granary, into their Father's kingdom. The final reward is deeply personal and familial. It is a homecoming, a recognition as children, and the reception of the inheritance the Father has prepared. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." He did not say will be, but is. That inheritance is already given now to those who live as good seed, and it will be fully realized at the harvest. 47. The parable teaches about a spiritual ecosystem. Good and evil coexist, interacting in this world. Every action has a consequence. There is a season for planting and a season for harvesting. Life is not a sterile laboratory where good is perfectly protected, but an open field, a complex ecosystem where faith must learn to survive and thrive. Jesus taught his disciples to pray, "And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." This prayer acknowledges the reality of that ecosystem. There is temptation, there is evil. We do not pray to be taken out of the field, but to be preserved and protected right in the middle of it. 48. The final light is the revelation of inner quality. Shining like the sun is not a reward given from the outside, like a robe being draped on. It is the outward expression of the inner light, of the good nature that was nurtured, cultivated, and preserved throughout a lifetime. Jesus said, "The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light." This means that the purity of the soul, of the inner vision, will make the whole person a source of light. The glory of the kingdom is the shining of those whose eyes and bodies have been purified. 49. Patience is not passivity. The owner's command to let it be is not advice to ignore it and do nothing. The wheat's job is still to keep growing, absorbing sunlight, rooting deeply, and producing grain. Patience in the spiritual life is an active trust, a continuation of doing our part while entrusting the final outcome to God. After Jesus ascended, the apostles did not just sit and wait for his return. They actively went out, preaching, healing, and building the community. They were living out the command, continue to make their wheat and others' wheat grow, while patiently waiting for the owner's harvest. 50. Every story ends with a harvest. No matter how long and difficult the growing season, it will surely have an end. This is a reminder and a call to live a conscious and purposeful life. Every choice, every action we take today is contributing to what we will be in the final harvest. Jesus ended many of his teachings with the words, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." This was a call to action, urging each listener to live in vigilance, realizing that the story of their life is being written every day, and there will be a final chapter where everything will be brought to light and reaped according to what was sown. Before we continue today's journey of discovery, we kindly ask you to take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If this content brings positive value, Don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive things to your friends and family. We invite you to continue the program. 51. Evil cannot exist independently. It always needs a good field to parasitize. The enemy does not sow weeds in the desert or among rocks. He sows them in the good wheat field. This shows that evil has no life of its own. It must exist by imitating, weakening, and feeding off what is good. It needs an environment of goodness to blend in and cause harm. A woman complained to the Lord, "Why is it that the best communities are often where the worst divisions happen?" Jesus replied, "Do you see mistletoe growing on a rock? No. It only grows on healthy trees to suck their sap." Similarly, division and deception do not arise in dead souls. They seek to creep into places of living faith to destroy from within. 52. Confusion is one of the enemy's greatest weapons. The core of the problem in the parable is that the tares look just like the wheat. The enemy's goal is not just to sow evil, but to make people unable to distinguish between good and evil, true and false. When the boundaries are blurred, chaos reigns. The disciples were arguing about the teachings of other groups who also spoke in God's name. Philip said, "What they say sounds very true, teacher." Jesus replied, "Does a counterfeiter make coins that look completely different? No, he makes coins that look almost identical to the real ones. Only an expert assayer can tell the difference. Similarly, the most dangerous false teaching is not one that is completely different, but one that is 99% truth with just 1% poison." 53. A good servant recognizes the problem, but a wise servant waits for instructions. The fact that the servants discovered the weeds shows they were attentive and responsible. But their wisdom stopped at proposing a hasty solution. True wisdom lies not just in identifying the problem, but in the humility to ask for guidance and wait for instructions from the one with the broader view. When Jesus was arrested in the garden, Peter drew his sword and acted immediately to protect his teacher. That was the act of a loyal servant. But Jesus stopped him. "Put your sword back in its sheath." He then healed the high priest's servant. Jesus taught Peter that loyalty must be paired with obedience to the master's plan, even if that plan seems to go against the servant's logic and zeal. 54. Growth is a process of self-revelation. Time does not change the nature of the plant. It only makes that nature more and more apparent. Weeds remain weeds, and wheat remains wheat. Our life's journey is the same. Trials, choices, and time will gradually strip away the facades, revealing our true selves, showing which seed we were grown from. A person asked the Lord, "How do I know if my faith is real or just a passing emotion?" Jesus pointed to two young plants. It is hard to tell them apart now, but wait and see. The plant that sinks its roots deeper to find water in the drought, the one that strives to bear fruit in its season, that is the good plant. True faith is not proven by words at the beginning, but by endurance and fruit throughout the journey. 55. The existence of weeds does not defile the nature of the wheat. A stalk of wheat growing next to a weed is still 100% wheat. It still absorbs sunlight and nutrients to become itself. Our divine dignity and good nature are not diminished by the sinful environment around us, unless we allow that toxicity to seep in and change us. The Pharisees criticized Jesus. He eats and drinks with tax collectors and sinners. They assumed that contact would defile him. Jesus replied, "Does the sunlight that shines on a mud puddle become dirty from the puddle? Or does the light itself dry up the mud? A person with a strong soul brings light to the darkness. He is not swallowed by it. 56. The final judgment is an act of mercy for the righteous. For the wheat, the harvest is a liberation. It is the time they are freed from the struggle for nutrients, separated from the presence of the weeds. The removal of evil is not just punishment. It is an act of protection and restoration of purity for the good. A poor widow was being oppressed and her land encroached upon by her wealthy neighbor. She came to pray in the temple, "O Lord, how long?" Jesus saw this and said to his disciples, "Do you see this widow? My Father hears her cry." The harvest day for the oppressor is a day of reckoning. But for her, it is the day her boundaries are re-established in eternal peace. It is the day of liberation. 57. Each plant in the field is responsible for its own fruit. The wheat is not rewarded for the failure of the weeds, and the weeds are not condemned for the success of the wheat. Judgment is based on the nature and results of each individual. We cannot blame our circumstances or others for our own human nature. In the parable of the talents, the servant who received 1 talent hid it and blamed his master. "I knew you are a hard man, so I was afraid." The master did not accept that excuse. He judged the servant based on his own action, laziness, and irresponsibility, not on his circumstances or on others. Each person will answer for their own fruit. 58. Silence in the face of injustice is not always complicity. Sometimes it is the owner's wisdom. The world is always crying out for God to intervene immediately. But the parable shows that waiting can be a more intentional and wise action. God's silence is not indifference, but patience to protect a higher purpose that we cannot see. When Jesus stood before Pilate, he was almost completely silent in the face of the accusations. Pilate was amazed. "Are you not going to answer?" Jesus' silence was not weakness or complicity with injustice. It was the silence of the field owner, who knew that the harvest would not come through arguments in an earthly court, but through a greater plan to be fulfilled at the right time. 59. True power lies not in uprooting, but in cultivating. The owner's ultimate strength is shown not in his ability to destroy the weeds immediately, but in his ability to make the wheat grow and bear fruit, despite the enemy's sabotage. The final victory is not the destruction of evil, but the fulfillment of good. The disciples asked Jesus how to build the kingdom of heaven. He did not say, "Go and overthrow the Roman Empire." Instead, he said, "Go and preach the good news, heal the sick, love your enemies." The power of the kingdom is shown through cultivation and healing, not by swords and destruction. 60. Human impatience often stems from fear. The servants were afraid the weeds would spread and ruin the crop. The owner, because he had the full picture and faith in the final outcome, was not afraid. Because he was not afraid, he could be patient. A complete faith brings peace and patience because it removes the fear of the future. When the boat was in the storm, the disciples panicked and woke Jesus. "Teacher, we're going to drown." They were impatient for him to act now. Jesus, who was not afraid, rebuked them. "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" He taught that peace and patience come from faith, not from the absence of danger. 61. The enemy sows and leaves. The owner stays until the harvest. Evil is often an act of sabotage followed by a disappearance, leaving the consequences for others. Goodness is the opposite. It is a long-term commitment, a persistent presence, caring and accompanying until all is complete. Jesus said, "The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." The hired hand, when he sees the wolf coming, abandons the sheep and runs away. The enemy is like the hired hand, with no attachment. Jesus, the good owner, stays with his field, even at the cost of his own life. 62. Truth does not need to defend itself aggressively. It just needs time to grow. The wheat does not need to fight the weeds. It simply continues to be itself, reaching for the light. The strength of truth is the same. It does not lie in winning arguments, but in its inner vitality and its ability to prove itself over time and by the fruit it bears. When questioned by the chief priests about his authority, Jesus did not enter into a power struggle. He asked them a question back about John the Baptist, and their silence said it all. He let the truth reveal itself, rather than using force to impose it. 63. The sorting at the harvest is based on nature, not on opinion. Whether a plant is wheat or a weed does not depend on what it thinks of itself or what other plants think of it. The angel sort based on an objective, undeniable reality. The fruit it produces. God's judgment is beyond all human prejudice, reputation, or self-delusion. Jesus warned, "On that day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons?' Then I will tell them plainly, 'I never knew you.'" He judges based on the true nature of their relationship and their actions, not on their titles or outward activities. 64. The greatest freedom of the wheat is to become fully itself. The wheat's destiny is fulfilled in the owner's granary. That is when it achieves the ultimate purpose of its existence. Similarly, heaven is not a place of passive enjoyment, but a state where a person is freed from all obstacles, weeds, to be able to live fully and express completely the good nature God sowed in them. Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." This liberation is the freedom to become the true person God desires, just as the wheat is free to bear grain without being choked by weeds. 65. The presence of weeds teaches the wheat a lesson in dependence on the owner. If the field were perfect, perhaps the servants and the wheat would become complacent. The problem of the weeds is a constant reminder that they cannot solve everything themselves. They need the wisdom, patience, and final intervention of the owner. Hardship keeps us humble and close to God. St. Paul later wrote about his thorn in the flesh. He begged the Lord to take it away, but the Lord replied, "My grace is sufficient for you." That weakness, that weed, was the very thing that kept Paul relying on God's strength instead of his own. 66. God's anger is reserved for the harvest. His mercy is for the growing season. The entire time from sowing until just before the harvest is the season of grace. During this period, rain and sun are given to both the righteous and the wicked. This is the time of mercy, of opportunity. The time of just and decisive judgment is a specific and final moment. When they brought the woman caught in adultery, they demanded immediate judgment according to the law, the harvest. But Jesus operated in the growing season. He did not condemn, but gave a new chance. Go now and leave your life of sin. He showed that now is still the time of mercy. 67. Do not let the existence of evil make you doubt the good sower. The servant's first reaction might have been to doubt the quality of the master's seed, but the owner corrected them immediately. The seed was good, but an enemy had interfered. The parable teaches us to assign responsibility correctly. Do not blame God for the evil in the world. Recognize it as the work of the enemy. Job, in his suffering, was pressured by his friends to believe he must have done something wrong to be punished by God. But Job held fast to his integrity. In the end, God vindicated him. Job did not let the existence of weeds in his life make him doubt the good nature of his Creator. 68. The binding of the weeds into bundles shows that evil, when exposed, is united in its destruction. In the world, those who do evil may act individually and seem unrelated. But on the day of judgment, their common nature will lead them to a common fate. The bundle symbolizes the inevitable union of those with the same nature to face the consequences together. Jesus said of the Pharisees, "Leave them. They are blind guides. If the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit." He showed that those who share a spiritual blindness will share a common end. 69. The granary is not just a place of safety, but also of utility. Wheat is gathered into the granary not to be put on display, but to become food, to give life, to create new life. The righteous in the kingdom of heaven are not retired uselessly. They become part of God's great life and providence, continuing to serve a higher purpose. Jesus told his disciples, "Truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, you who have followed me will receive 100 times as much." The reward is not just rest, but a fruitfulness on a higher, eternal level. 70. The explanation of the parable is only for those who truly seek it. Jesus told the story to the crowds, but he only explained its deeper meaning to the disciples when they came to ask him privately. This shows that the deepest spiritual truths are not dispensed casually. They are revealed only to those souls who are hungry, humble, and actively seek wisdom. After telling a series of parables, Jesus asked his disciples, "Do you understand all these things?" They replied, "Yes." Only after confirming their desire to understand did he continue to teach them deeper things. The door of wisdom only opens for those who knock. Before we continue today's journey of discovery, we kindly ask you to take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If this content brings positive value, don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive things to your friends and family. We invite you to continue the program. 71. Sowing is an act of faith in the future. Sabotage is an act of bitterness toward the present. The sower works with a vision of the future harvest. He accepts the labor and the weight because of his hope for the fruit. Conversely, the enemy acts for no constructive purpose. He sabotages purely out of envy and bitterness toward the good that exists, seeking to ruin the present, not build a future. When the disciples saw the merchants in the temple, they were filled with anger. Jesus was too, but his action was different. The disciples just wanted to overthrow, to destroy. Jesus, after cleaning the temple, sat down and healed the blind and the lame who came to him right there. He said, "The enemy's action is only to destroy. My Father's action, even when cleaning, is to plant something new and better." 72. Our identity is determined by whom we belong to, not just by what we do. The parable doesn't say those who do good and those who do evil. Jesus specified the children of the kingdom and the children of the evil one. This shows that our deep identity stems from our spiritual origin, from our choice of whom to belong to. Our actions are just the fruit that grows from that root. A Roman centurion came to ask Jesus to heal his servant. The Jewish elders interjected, "He deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation." They judged him by what he did. But Jesus was amazed by the centurion's own words. "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof." He saw the man's faith, his recognition of belonging to a higher power. Jesus said, "I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith." He looked at whom the man belonged to in faith, not just what he did. 73. Apathy is the most fertile ground for evil. The enemy came while everyone was sleeping. This sleep is not just physical, but spiritual. Apathy, indifference, lack of vigilance. When a community or an individual no longer cares about discerning right from wrong, no longer desires truth, that is when they throw open the door for all kinds of weeds to grow. Jesus looked at Jerusalem and wept. He wept not because the city was sinful, but because of its apathy. He said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes." The tragedy was not the presence of evil, but humanity's blindness and sleepiness in the face of the invitation to good. 74. Before there is judgment, there must be recognition. The servant's first step was to recognize that something was wrong. "Sir, didn't you sow good seed?" They had to look closely, compare, and ask questions. Similarly, the spiritual journey cannot begin without self-examination and recognition. We must learn to look at the field of our soul and honestly recognize what is wheat and what are weeds. Zacchaeus, the tax collector, climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus. He was just curious. But when Jesus looked up and called his name, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately," that very moment of being recognized changed everything. Christ's recognition awakened self-recognition in Zacchaeus, leading to his declaration, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor." 75. The destruction of evil is not an act of revenge, but of purification for the kingdom. The ultimate goal of the harvest is a pure granary. The burning of the weeds is not an act of glee by the owner, but a necessary step to protect the integrity of the wheat and the purity of the kingdom. It is like a surgeon removing a tumor, not out of hatred, but to save the body. When Jesus spoke of Jerusalem's coming destruction, the disciples thought of punishment. But he immediately spoke of the Son of Man, coming to gather his elect from the four winds. His focus was not on destruction, but on gathering and purification. All the collapsing of the old is to make way for a new and pure kingdom of heaven. 76. The final regret, weeping and gnashing of teeth, is the pain of realizing a life has been wasted. This is not just the pain of punishment, but the agony of realization. It is the moment the weed realizes that it absorbed the same sun, the same rain as the wheat, but ended up useless and toxic. It is the torment of knowing it could have been something else. But it is too late. Jesus told the parable of the prodigal son. When the son was in the pig pen, starving, he came to his senses. That moment of coming to his senses, if it comes too late, is the very image of weeping and gnashing of teeth. Fortunately, the son still had time to return. The parable is a warning to come to our senses while the growing season is still here. 77. God's patience is a shield for the righteous. We often think of God's patience as grace for sinners to have time to repent. That is true. But this parable emphasizes another reason, that patience is first to protect the righteous, so that not one stalk of wheat is harmed unjustly. God accepts letting the whole field look chaotic for a time. When the disciples wanted to stop those not in their group from performing miracles in Jesus' name, Jesus said, "Do not stop them." His tolerance was not just for those people, but a lesson for the disciples. Do not be quick to judge, because in your haste you may harm the good seedlings that my Father is quietly cultivating in places you do not expect. 78. Evil creates uniformity in destruction. Good creates unity in glory. The weeds are tied in bundles. They lose their individuality, becoming an anonymous mass to be destroyed. Conversely, the righteous shine like the sun. They are not dissolved, but together create a radiant splendor, where each person is both fully themselves and united with others in God's light. After the Last Supper, Jesus prayed that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. This oneness is not a uniformity that erases individuality, but a deep communion in love, like the unified shining of the saints. 79. The important question is not why does evil exist, but what plant will I become in its midst? The parable does not offer a philosophical answer to the problem of evil. Instead, it poses an existential challenge. It acknowledges the reality of the weeds and immediately shifts the focus to the choice and responsibility of each individual. In this imperfect world, will you choose to live as wheat or as weeds? A person came to ask Jesus, "Lord, are only a few people going to be saved?" He wanted a statistical, theoretical answer. Jesus did not answer the question. He replied, "Make every effort to enter through the narrow door." He turned a philosophical question into a personal call to action. 80. The granary is where value is recognized and preserved. In the field, the wheat's value is still potential and under threat. But once in the granary, that value is realized, completely safe, and acknowledged by the owner himself. The kingdom of heaven is the place where all our quiet efforts, all our good values, will be recognized and preserved forever. Jesus spoke of the poor widow who put 2 small coins into the temple treasury. She has put in more than all the others. In the field of the world, those 2 coins were nothing, but in God's granary, their value was recognized as the greatest. 81. The good sower knows each of his seeds by name. Although sown together in one field, the good seeds are not an anonymous crowd to the owner. Just as the good shepherd knows his sheep and his sheep know him, the good sower knows and cares for every stalk of wheat he has planted. When the resurrected Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene, she did not recognize him until he called her name, Mary. That single word, her name, revealed a deep, personal relationship. We are not anonymous plants. We are children known and called by name by our Father. 82. The harvest will separate outwardly what has already separated inwardly. The final judgment is not an arbitrary decision by God. It is merely the confirmation and public declaration of the choice each soul has already made throughout its life. A plant has already chosen to become a weed by how it grew. The harvest just separates it from the wheat. Jesus described the judgment using the image of sheep and goats. He will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. This separation is based on what they did or did not do in life. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. Their inner choice was expressed outwardly, and the judgment day is just the announcement of that reality. 83. This world is a mixed field, but the kingdom of heaven is not. The parable brings great hope that the state of chaos, this mixture of good and evil we endure daily, is only temporary. There is an ultimate reality, a granary, where purity and peace are absolute. When the disciples saw Jesus transfigured, they tasted a glimpse of the reality of the kingdom, where there is no darkness, only radiant light. Peter exclaimed, "It is good for us to be here." That longing for a pure place is sown in every heart, and the parable promises that such a place is real. 84. The presence of good is a silent rebuke to evil. The wheat does not need to shout or fight the weeds. By simply growing quietly, flowering, and bearing grain, it is living proof of the uselessness and wrongness of the weeds. A holy, loving life is in itself the strongest criticism of wickedness. The very presence of Jesus, the sinless one, among sinners, was a light that exposed the darkness. Many felt uncomfortable in his presence, not because he condemned them, but because his holiness made their unrighteousness visible. 85. The angels are the perfect reapers because they act without personal sentiment. Human judgment is always skewed by love, hate, prejudice, and emotion. The angels, as executors of God's holy will, perform their work with absolute precision, justice, and impartiality. They simply carry out the sorting based on nature, without adding any sentiment. When Jesus said, "Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son," he was speaking of a judgment based on absolute truth. The angels are the executors of that judgment, ensuring that no human bias or error can interfere. 86. You cannot judge a harvest just by looking at it mid-season. If a person only looked at the field in the middle of the growing season, when the weeds were flourishing, he might conclude the crop was a failure. But the owner, who sees the final vision, remains calm. Do not be quick to despair at the difficulties and the prevalence of evil in the present. Trust in the owner's final result. When Jesus was crucified, it seemed like a complete failure. The weeds had apparently won. The disciples were in despair. But that was just a mid-season view. 3 days later, the resurrection showed the true result of the harvest, a glorious outcome that no one expected. 87. The enemy's sabotage ultimately highlights the owner's glory even more. The owner's ability to produce a bountiful harvest, despite the enemy's sabotage, proves his wisdom and power even more brilliantly than if the field had been perfect from the start. God allows evil to happen, and then turns its very consequences into part of his greater victory. The betrayal by Judas was an act of the enemy, but it was through that very act that God's great plan of redemption was carried out. Human evil could not hinder, but ultimately served, the glory of God's mercy and power. 88. The nature of weeds is to cause stumbling. Jesus explained that the angels will gather all things that cause sin, or stumbling blocks. The weeds do not just exist passively. Their roots harm the wheat's roots. Their stalks fight for light. The existence of evil in the world is always an obstacle, a temptation, a stumbling block for those trying to live good lives. Jesus said, "Woe to the one who causes one of these little ones to stumble. It would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." He emphasized the seriousness of becoming a weed that harms the faith of the young wheat. 89. The glory of the righteous is to reflect the glory of their Father. They will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. The sun in our solar system is a source of light, but here the image implies that the ultimate source of light is God the Father himself. The saints shine by perfectly reflecting his light and love, just as the moon reflects the sun. Their glory is a glory of communion. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai after meeting with God, his face was so radiant that the people were afraid to look at him. That light was not his own. It was a reflection of the glory of God he had beheld. This was a foreshadowing of the shining of the saints. 90. The story of the field is an invitation for each listener to ask, "From which seed am I growing?" The parable is not just a theological lesson about the future. It is a mirror held up to each of us in the present. After hearing the story, the question is not what will happen to the world, but who am I in this world? What seed am I nurturing in my soul? Whom am I choosing to belong to? After teaching, Jesus often said, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." This was an urgent invitation, urging each listener to apply the story to their own life, to let it challenge and transform them from within. And so we have walked together through a long but profound journey of contemplation, exploring 90 life philosophies inspired by one of Jesus's most meaningful parables. From the simple image of a field with wheat and weeds, we have seen an entire universe of divine wisdom, about God's patience, about the silent struggle between good and evil in each of our souls, and about the great hope in a glorious harvest. This journey may end here in terms of duration, but hopefully it will open a new journey within each of our souls. Church Audio sincerely thanks you for listening and accompanying us. Your presence is the greatest motivation for us to continue producing audio products that nurture faith. Now, as this audio concludes, please take a minute of silence to ask yourself, in the field of my life, which seed am I cultivating? Am I being wheat, or am I carelessly letting weeds overrun my soul? If these philosophies have touched your heart, please share this video with your relatives and friends as a way for us to sow more good seeds together. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Church Audio, Thandung Audio channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next journeys. In particular, we look forward to reading your comments, sharing which philosophy impacted you the most. May God bless you and grant you peace. See you in the next program. Church Audio, calming the soul